We are fortunate to have Bob Kolasky back with us at this hour. He is the Senior Vice President for Critical Infrastructure at Exiger. He is also the former Assistant Director for CISA, that is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency that operates inside the Department of Homeland Security. Bob, did this just happen? Or is this a problem that has been coming at us like a freight train that we just refuse to see?
I think the latter characterization is probably more accurate, Dale. This is something that has been happening over time for natural reasons. Our cars have become more like, as car companies like to talk about, they become more like computers. More things are automated. There's more integration between your personal devices and how you operate the car. And so as technology has evolved, our cars have naturally become more holders of our data. What hasn't happened at the same pace is safety reviews of what's changing, regulatory oversight over how the car companies are operating. And, I think what the Mozilla report pointed out is at some point the car companies, the car makers haven't had the incentives to put in privacy protections. They haven't really done that. And as they've collected more data, they're actually monetizing some of that data, and they have financial incentives to do that. So we have a business that's become more technologically advanced without a regulatory oversight body, and that's led to all of a sudden, a lot of things that we do in cars is potentially exposed to be used for different purposes. And what you do in your car is now just between you and what you do in your car. It's available to other people to see.
So Bob, I think you just hinted at it, but is that how my car can betray my sex life?
I haven't studied what Mozilla has in terms of how your car can betray your sex life, but there are things that could happen in a car. Then if you're plugged in your cell phone and it's plugged into your car, who knows what could happen? So what I think that the whole thing says in this whole line of questioning is, I don't think a lot of us have fully thought through kind of what information is becoming available and is held in a car, rental car and the like, and what information can then be sold and transferred to other things, and are there other ways that information can be used? And so, you can't assume that things that happen in a car are private at this point. And I think what we'd like to see happen, what Congress would like to see happen, what I would certainly advocate from Exiger, is a clearer regulatory understanding of what information can be collected, how it's treated, and protections around sensitive information.
I just don't want my wife to know I bought that Whopper at Burger King. But Bob, aside from checking every serial number on every car part out of concerns that it may have come from China, what can we do?
Yeah, going back to the Whopper example for a second, you also don't want your health insurance company to know that necessarily, right? That's not part of what they're allowed to know. So that's just a practical example. Well, that information could be shared for different purposes. In terms of what can be done here, China may be part of the issue, but here, first and foremost, I keep talking about the regulatory issue. First and foremost, what are the rules that car companies are operating under? What authorities, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the National Highway Transportation Safety Association, have to have clear lines in the sand of what cars can do from protecting what they need to do to protect privacy. And, to the extent that these car companies are operating similarly to what we're talking about with ByteDance and TikTok earlier, operating and doing business in China, there also need to be protections that the data doesn't get to China.
Hey, Bob, is my car transmitting my personal data, or is it stored in its systems until I either take it and trade it in or somebody downloads it at a terminal?
Not knowing what car you drive, I'm not sure. So part of it is, I don't think any of us really know what's happening, or to the extent we don't know how to figure that out. And that's not going into, I would posit, that's not going into buying decisions. It's not going into decisions of how we choose to engage with our automobiles. And so more transparency to answer your question, so the degree to which information that goes into the computer that is your car, and the degree to which that's getting transferred somewhere else, that needs to happen. And so let's start with transparency of what information you're sharing with the car, and is that information leaking out of your car into other things? different cars, different rules, and all that, and different technologies. So I don't think there's a general answer to your question. What there is, and what the Mozilla report points out, is most of these car companies are operating under unclear privacy regimes, and consumers, when they're making decisions about which cars to buy, aren't taking this into account, don't have an easy way to take this into account. And even if they wanted to take into account a car that protects privacy, at this point, the only thing you can do to do that is buy a car with more analog technology. And I don't think that's where we want to be, because all this automated digital technology is good for safety. It's good for convenience. But there needs to be greater privacy protections.
Bob, I'm part of that generation that had to read 1984 before 1984. What do you say to people who say Big Brother is already watching us? Our lives are open books. Our pictures are taken by the TSA the minute we come into the airport, street level cameras nationwide, even when we get our money out of the ATM. So what do you say to people that say, why should I worry about it? Because we've already jumped the shark.
It's not a binary decision, right? There's certainly an inevitability of that there's more information collected, and there's very little that any of us can do as somebody who lives in the middle of a normal society to fully protect all our privacy. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some level of privacy protections, that when information is being asked for by your insurance company to make a financial decision, that when information is being asked for by law enforcement that isn't their right to get access to, you should have protections in place. And so it can't be just either no privacy or privacy protections. There can be smart protections put in place. And so what do I say about the 1984 analogy is we need to continue to have laws to protect against getting to a stage where Big Brother's actually doing things that are working against us with our information, and that we can't give up. We have to continue to put smart privacy rules in place. In this case, the automakers pledged that they were going to follow certain privacy standards, and it seems that the Mozilla report demonstrates that the automakers aren't living up to their own pledge. So somebody needs to step in and work on behalf of the consumer.
Up until tonight, my major concern was eating that Whopper inside my wife's smart car. Now you've just escalated it. Bob Kolasky, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Dale.